What's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back into the video day, and today we're going to be talking about a trade that would send Chris Paul back to the Rockets. As today, Bleacher Report on NBA Bleacher Report rumors that an article that said that the Rockets could potentially be interested in trading for point guard Chris Paul this offseason if if their plans with James Harden and free agency do not work, and Harden either re-signs with the Sixers or even goes to Phoenix, that Chris Paul could be a potential trade target for the Houston Rockets, and the Rockets would potentially pivot to Chris Paul. And to me, it makes a lot of sense why the Rockets would want to do this. I think the Rockets, what they're kind of looking from Harden is, number one, I think they want Harden back. I think that is the number one thing. But I want to also note that you're not trading for Chris Paul if you're signing James Harden. That is, you've tried that already in Houston. It didn't work out. It's not going to work out again. And not only that, but you have Jalen. What happens to Jalen Green? I guess if Chris Paul, if somehow, and that's not going to happen, but if Chris Paul and James Harden were on the same team, Paul would be the point guard, James would be the shooting guard, Jalen would be the small forward, Jabari would be the power forward, and then the center would be Alperen Sengun. It doesn't work. The two guys already played with each other for 2 seasons, didn't get along. Harden pushed CP3 out. It wouldn't work. I think Chris Paul would be okay coming back to the Rockets, even though he kind of got forced out of there. But he's not going to want to come back there if James is there as well. But I could see Chris being okay with being with the Houston Rockets with that young core. We see a lot of veteran good players be interested in this Rockets young core. I'm going to name some players like Austin Rivers and Paul George. Paul George, I'm not saying Rockets are going to get Paul George, but, we saw Paul George on the podcast with Jalen Green. He really supports these young guys the Rockets have and think they have a lot of potential and a lot of talent. Shows you, how some of these NBA players have faith in this team. Austin Rivers has, said some stuff about it on Twitter the last couple of days about this Rockets team, saying he wasn't, he was asked about, him potentially coming back to the Rockets. Would he come back to the Rockets again? He said, why not? And he said that he loves Jalen. He was asked about Jalen Green and Ime Udoka. He said he loves both, and he thinks Udoka will be great for Jalen Green's development. So you hear a bunch of veterans talk good about them, and Chris Paul's an amazing mentor. I think one of the big reasons why the Rockets could be interested in Chris Paul if the James Harden signing doesn't work out is, number one, because of, what happened, what he did with OKC. We saw how good of a mentor and a good of a leader I know this was 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago. I think 3 years ago would be August. But we saw how good of a mentor Chris Paul was to that OKC team in the 2019-2020 season, and how good of a leader and a mentor and a teacher he was to that young core in OKC. And he was so good of a player at the same time too. They were able to make the playoffs. I think they were the 4th seeded. They were the 4th seed in the West. They played us in the first round too. We beat them in 7 games in the bubble. Yeah, that was a hard series for the Rockets as well. But and I don't want to hear people say it was the bubble. But I think that I really do think that Chris Paul could be a decent fit for the Rockets just because of how good of a mentor he'd be for the young guards and the young team all around. But do I think it happens? No, because I do think James Harden is coming back to Houston. But I do think Chris Paul is most likely the backup plan for the Rockets if James Harden doesn't come here, or he goes to Phoenix or he goes to Philly, which at this point I don't really think James is not going to come here, with NBA executives saying they expect James Harden to sign with Houston. So I don't really know, but I think Chris Paul would be a good fit, and it's going to be a cheap trade. It's going to be a really, really cheap trade target. It's not going to be that expensive to get Chris Paul and the Rockets, and I think it'd be a good move. I think it'd be a good mentor. Let's talk about what a trade would look like to send Chris Paul to the Houston Rockets. The Rockets would send Kevin Porter Jr., KJ Martin, who the Phoenix Suns have had interest in trading for KJ Martin in the past, the 20th overall pick, and 2 seconds to the Phoenix Suns for Chris Paul. So they get Kevin Porter Jr., who averaged 19 points per game last season. I don't think KPJ would be playing point guard. I think they would ultimately go get somebody else in the free agency market, like Fred VanVleet, to play the point guard role. I think what you're most likely looking at, if this trade does happen, what the Suns do from then on, moving forward, I think the Suns would ultimately end up go sign Fred VanVleet, and then Kevin Porter Jr. comes off the bench as the backup point guard or the backup shooting guard and is a really productive scorer off the bench. So final trade, KPJ, KJ Martin. KJ Martin would be really solid. KJ Martin would be a starter for the Phoenix Suns. The starting lineup would be, or no, KJ would probably come off the bench because you also remember what the Phoenix Suns would be getting back for DeAndre Ayton. So the lineup would look like Fred VanVleet at point guard, Devin Booker at shooting guard, whoever they get back for DeAndre Ayton. Let's say I did a trade proposal for the Hornets and the Hornets and the let's just throw it out there and say the Pacers and the Suns flip-flop Ayton and Turner and then like Ayton and a first-round pick for Miles Turner. So the lineup would look like the lineup for the Suns would look like Fred VanVleet, Devin Booker, KJ Martin, Kevin Durant, and Miles Turner. That's a really solid lineup. You got the scoring with VanVleet, Booker, and Durant. You have the defense with KJ Martin and Miles Turner, 2 really good shot blockers. Also, VanVleet's a really solid defender as well. So it's a really solid defensive lineup. Then you have off the bench Kevin Porter Jr. So I think it'd be a solid, couple moves for the Suns to get Kevin Porter Jr. for off the bench, and then Miles Turner to start, and VanVleet as well. So Suns lose Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton, and then they get back Fred VanVleet, Kevin Porter Jr., KJ Martin, and Miles Turner. I think it'd be a realistic, really good offseason for the Phoenix Suns. But yeah, you guys have your thoughts on the trade idea for the Rockets. I don't think it will happen for the Rockets, but I do think it is one of the top options off the board for the Rockets if James Harden if that signing is not good. Something ultimately happens. The Rockets think he's asking for too much, or he wants to return to Philly because he likes whoever they hired as head coach. Who knows? And then James ultimately decides to re-sign with Philly or sign with someone else. Then I think Chris Paul would probably be one of the top options for the Rockets at point guard next season. But you guys, let me know your thoughts. That's the video. If you guys enjoyed, let me know your thoughts on the trade idea. And that's the video. If you guys enjoyed, peace out. Go Rockets.